Hello everyone. So this is another session with IGP to learn together. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our Institution of Global Professionals free webinar. And I would like to thank to all of our participants for joining in this session right now. And please stay with us till the end. So my dear lovely participants, once again, I'm your host for this live session. And myself, Nasreen, and I'm from Bangladesh. So ladies and gentlemen, really I'm proud to be associated with IGP as a global member. I feel honored and respected to host this webinar, and it's my delight to welcome you all to our Institution of Global Professionals webinar. So it's my pleasure and humble request to all of you, please stay with us till the end. I hope that you will have many takeaways and payoffs from this webinar. Each time you can give a react to our live session and comment in our comment box also. So don't forget to tag, share, and mention your friends in our comments. So also you can give a thumbs up to our Facebook official page and subscribe our YouTube channel. So my dear lovely participants, let's learn together and grow together. Because we believe that power is gained by sharing knowledge, not holding it. You can also share this webinar in Facebook groups, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn also. So once again, I'm Nasreen, member in IGP. Welcome you all to our institution of global professionals. So, so let me share the concept of IGP because every day we have new participants who join in a live session. So for them, I'm sharing with you. So IGP serves students and community resource providing holistic social work and education for great professional generation over the world. IGP also leading on a skill development institute with thousands of learners worldwide. We make it get able to face any circumstance and develop their skill. We are entrusted with international recognition. So we believe that it's not effective to increase one's skills just by encouraging formal education. So we provide effective training and consultations to generate professional generation all over the world. We organized our webinar online offline courses, etc. by fast and trained speakers and coaches from all over the world. And you have already known our mission is to empower people and enhance. And we have already successfully completed our 593 webinar. And today, right now, I'm sharing webinar number 594, and the topic is effective assessment of learning. So let's start our program with IGP's mantra that is feed your skills. So, dear participants, let's welcome our wonderful speaker from Philippines, Ma'am Dr. Roda Vasco Galante. So let's give a give a claps, virtual claps for our wonderful speaker. Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. I think because of technical problem, uh, we will wait for her. Let's see. So everyone, please don't forget to tag, share, and comments in our comment box also. So you can also mention your friends in our comment box. So we will wait for our speaker. I think because of technical problem, she cannot hear. So we are going to wait for her. Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me? Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, we cannot hear you. So if you rejoin again, I think the problem will be solved. Okay, so we will wait for her for a while. Meantime, you can tag, share, and mention your friends in our comment box, and don't forget to share this live session in your timeline and Facebook groups also. So we are waiting for our speaker. Hello, ma'am. Yes, now you are busy.
Sorry, I had some
It's okay, ma'am.
difficulties. I have to restart. Sorry.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
So, am I going to share already?
And please share your comments. Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
It's visible already. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. You can start your presentation.
Okay, so good afternoon. Good afternoon from the Philippines. I'm sorry for the delay. I was having some technical difficulties. Okay, so I am Roda Vasco Galango from the Philippines, and I am going to share about effective assessment of learning. I believe this is a very timely and a very relevant topic, considering that we are having some problems on the attitude of the young generation these days. There are many research studies that have already proven that many of this, not only the young generation, but even the older generation, seem to have disconnected from the normal, how do you call this, definition of what it is to be human. Wait. So, what is the affective domain of learning? Uh, there are actually three educator psychologists who have espoused the idea that holistic learning or education has to look into the three domains of learning: the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. I am sure that many of us teachers are very familiar with the work of Dr. Benjamin Bloom. He is actually the main author of Bloom's taxonomy of objectives, where he has categorized learning objectives into three: the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. But sometime in 19, he worked solo on this topic for a long time, but then sometime in the 1960s, he teamed up with two prominent educator psychologists, that's Dr. B.B. Marshall and Dr. David Cratwell. So in 1964, they published a book entitled Taxonomy of Objectives, a handbook for educators. They defined affective domain of learning as a domain or a sphere of learning that includes the manner in which we deal with things emotionally. So I would like to highlight the term emotionally. It's different from rationally, which is a part of the cognitive aspect. So we deal with them how? By looking or analyzing our feelings towards them. What values do we attach to this? Do we appreciate this? Are we enthusiastic about the things that we are doing? Are we interested in the things that we are doing? What are our motivations? Let's say for learning. What are our motivations for teaching? And what is our attitude about education in general? What's our attitude about teaching and learning in general? So these three, particularly Dr. Craftwall, his emphasis is more on the affective domain of learning. And his work on this domain of learning is actually the most recognized among those proponents of affective learning. But what is affective assessment? Why do we need to assess our attitudes, our motivations, our values, our interests? Why do we have to reflect on our feelings? Why can't we just reason out as we usually do? Dr. James Popham, who is one of the advocates of criterion reference evaluation in education, defined affective assessment as a measurement of students' attitude, interest, and or values. Dr. Popham has recognized the fact that globally, education has actually focused more on the assessment of the cognitive aspect, what the students know, what they can do. But rarely is their attitude, their values assessed, their feelings. We rarely assess their feelings towards something. We give quizzes, but these quizzes are meant to gauge what they learned from a lesson that we have taught. But we do not ask them, what do you feel about the topic? In physical education, we ask them to demonstrate a particular skill. But rarely do we ask them, what did you feel when you were playing basketball? What did you feel when you were swimming? We rarely ask them also, what did you feel when you were taking the test? What did you feel when you were studying for the test? During the first day, usually during the first meeting, in our classes, we ask them to introduce themselves. But then we rarely ask them, what do you feel about the class? What do you feel about your classmates? What do you feel about entering this class? So, according to Crotwell, there are domains of affective learning. We start with receiving, which is the lowest, because in receiving, we are just being aware of or sensitive to the existence of certain ideas, objects or materials or phenomena, and we are just willing to tolerate them. So receiving is very superficial. It's like we are willing to accept them, but we don't go further into asking ourselves. We are willing to ask to accept this idea. Am I willing to make this idea an integral part of my everyday life? Will this idea be changing the way I look at things? Sometimes we just receive information without going into a deeper processing of this information. And so we ask our students, to what extent do you accept the fact that you are enrolled in a math subject? To what extent do you accept the fact that you are enrolled in a science subject? Or would you rather be in another subject? Sometimes they just look at the enrollment form and, hey, these are the subjects that I am going to enroll. But there is no deeper thinking of, do I really want to enroll in these subjects? Now, higher than receiving is responding. Responding, according to Crotwell, is being committed to a certain extent or a certain degree to the ideas or the materials or the objects or the phenomena. When you say phenomena, you're referring to events that are involved by actively responding to them. So it is higher than receiving, because in receiving, we simply receive the information, but there is no deeper processing of it. But if we do a deeper processing, then we are going to respond to it. And usually the response is something that is positive. Now, higher than responding is valuing. This happens when we have already recognized the importance of our response to a particular idea. That's why, according to Krathwohl, valuing is being willing to be perceived by others as espousing certain ideas, materials, or objects, or phenomena, and therefore, our response is now to support these ideas. We make them an integral part of our knowledge. We make them an integral part of our everyday life. Now, higher than valuing is the process of organization. Organization, according to Krathwohl, is relating to those already held and bringing them into a harmonious and internally consistent philosophy. So it is higher than valuing because we have already organized this into our system, into a particular system that we would like to adhere to. And therefore, the information that we have received, that we have responded, and that we attach a value to becomes an integral part of our life, something that we would like to support, It becomes part of our advocacy, and therefore future actions will be geared towards these ones. And then lastly, the highest, according to Krathwohl, is characterization by value or value set. So this one is, according to Krathwohl, to act consistently in accordance with the values that we have internalized. And so characterization actually requires a deeper resolution to accept changes, a deeper resolution or having a strong resolve to manage things, to support things, and to put them into practice, to model these things that we value so that it will be emulated by others. So this, according to Krathwohl, are the five layers of the affective domain of learning. Now, it is difficult to make an assessment of this because there would always be biases that are involved. We do not have the same feelings, we do not have the same perceptions, we do not have the same values. And so, there are some educators who say that affective assessment is something that is not scored. Unlike the cognitive domain and the psychomotor domain, which we usually score and give grades to. But for the affective domain, there really is no standard. There is no basis for us to say that, hey, your score in receiving is very low. Your score in responding is high. Your score in valuing is moderate. Your score in organization and characterization are low. You need to improve. Because we tend to be influenced by our own feelings, by our own values. So why is affective assessment important? As noted by Dr. James Popham, there is too much emphasis on the intellectual aspect. We give recognition to students, we give them honors when they graduate based on the grade point average that they have received in their subjects. This grade point average is usually the product of cognitive assessment and sometimes psychomotor assessment. And so we see an imbalance in the assessment of learning. The holistic learning is not assessed well, and we do not have a holistic evaluation because we forget usually to assess one very important domain, and that is the affective domain. Saxon and his companion in 2008 wrote that although the information from cognitive instruments is generally valid, reliable, and effective for placement, it does not address all the factors that might contribute to student success. So this is a recognition by Saxon and his companions of the important role that the affective assessment play in the overall evaluation of the performance of students. True enough, we subject our tests to validity. Someone goes over the items to see if the items are valid. Are we asking the correct answers? Are these questions reliable? Would passing this test ensure that the students will succeed in the next grade level? The focus is too much on what the student can intellectually perform. And so, we forget a very important aspect of learning, which is the affective domain. I do not know if there are schools out there which has a valid and a reliable instrument for assessing the affective dimension. There are personality tests, but personality tests just measure certain constructs or certain attributes. They do not go into the deeper emotions of the person. They rarely could give us a very good picture of the values or the attitude of a person. And our psychometricians would tell us that it is difficult to come up with an effective assessment instrument due to the fact that affect or attitude is not fixed. It's very fluid, meaning to say, time and again, our attitude changes, our motivations change, our interests change, and there are several factors that could affect these changes. However, Saxon and his companions still knows that even if with a highly fluid and a highly evolving attitude or affect of an individual, it is still very important to make an assessment of this dimension of learning. Bloom in 1973 pointed out that 25% of student performance is determined by affective characteristics. 75% is determined by the tests that we give them, the tests that measure their mental capability and the tests that measure their skills. But if we factor the affective characteristic, then that is going to complete the 100% scenario of student performance. So what is the implication of this? The grades that we see in our transcript of record or in our cards, report cards, are not a reflection of the totality of what they can do. They may be just a reflection of how much we have memorized, of what we know, of what we can do. But they do not determine the totality of our academic performance. There is something that is missing in the grades that's reflected in the report card and in the grades that are reflected in our transcript of record. And what is missing? The 25% affective characteristics. Sometimes employers get so impressed by looking at a grade of 90 and above, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, sometimes even 99. Or a remarks in a transcript of record, summa cum laude, magna cum laude, etc., with all the Latin honors. But this do not tell them about the affective characteristic of the person. There are many studies also on organizational behavior, organizational culture, organizational climate that will tell us that the culture of the organization, the climate of the organization is shaped not by the intellectual ability of the people, but it is shaped by their attitude, by their characteristics as a group of people. So what are the benefits of affective assessment to the students? So we are going to look first at affective assessment on the part of the students. Then after this, we look at the benefits of affective assessment on the part of teachers. So affective assessment makes the students reflect on the value of the lesson in their life. So what do we mean by this? I am sure you are also one of those who have asked this question, the proverbial question. What is the importance of algebra in my life? What is the importance of calculus in my life? Why am I made to look for the value of X, the value of Y? What are these in my life? Because we are just looking at the number. Our teacher would just tell us, you solve for the value of X, you solve for the value of Y, period. But if there is no processing, that is telling us to reflect, why do we have to look for this X? What is this X in our real life? What is this Y in our real life? Why do we have to do multiplication, addition, subtraction, division? What are the implications of this in our life? If the students are going to realize the value of this lesson in their everyday life, I am sure they are going to appreciate their lesson. And the more that they will be motivated to study it. Also, it leads them to expand their understanding of concepts in several realms of their life. So what do we mean by these several realms? We have our economic life. We do that every day. We go to the market, we buy, we purchase loads, we monitor our load, we buy online, etc. So what is online? What is the connection, therefore, between solving a particular problem and this thing that we are doing in our everyday life? Climate change. That is a lesson that we talk about in science, in social studies, and probably in other subjects. How this is included in other subjects, I do not know. What is the importance of climate change in our health? What is the importance of climate change in our relationship with each other? What is the importance of climate change in our personal life? Are we affected by this phenomenon of climate change? How do we discuss it in our classes? Are we discussing it in a purely theoretical manner, identifying the causes, etc., being too detached that we do not make the students reflect on their contributions to this phenomenon on climate change and the impact of this in their life at present and in their life in the future? Affective assessment makes our students develop their metacognitive skills. Now, we tend to think that metacognitive skills are functions of the intellect. These metacognitive skills, while they are factored in the cognitive level, cannot actually be achieved if they are not balanced by the affective domain. Metacognitive skills cannot be developed if we rely purely on reason and we do not acknowledge emotions. There has to be a balance between reason and emotion in order for us to fully develop our metacognitive skills. And what do we mean by metacognitive skills? These are metacognition, our ability to engage in metacognition. And what is metacognition? It's simply thinking about thinking. It is the process of thinking about our own thinking. Now, what does that mean? Why do I have to think about what I am thinking? So if I'm going to say, if at this moment, what I'm thinking is, what am I doing in this webinar? Now I am going to think about that thought. Why did I think of that? My thinking is, what am I doing in this webinar? So I'm going to think about that. Why is that a good thought? In the first place, I volunteered to render my services as a speaker. So why am I now thinking, and why am I now thinking this way? Is that a good thought? If it is not, then I have to dispense with it. Metacognition involves five processes. One is the process of planning. If we are going to do something, we plan for it. Why do we have to plan for it? Because we need to set a direction. After planning, we do a mental scripting. I'm going to do this first step, second step, third step, fourth step. That is too cognitive. Where does the affective dimension come in? The affective dimension comes in if I'm going to question myself. This is my first process. Is it going to work? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? Will it work? Will it not work? If it is going to work, what will I do next? If it is not going to work, then what will I do then? What am I going to still do it, or I'm going to change it, or I'm going to totally forget about it? Okay, so we make a mental script of what is going to happen if I am going to do this one. So we bring in our emotion. It is not just a matter of thinking, but it's also a matter of feeling. What will happen if? And then the third process is we do positive self talk. Okay, many psychologists would always tell us to think positively. But that again is very, thinking positively, that's very cognitive. It's just thinking, is there in the mind, is there in the brain. But if we are going to do a positive self-talk, we voice it out, we listen to what we are saying, then probably we will be making, hey, why am I thinking that way? No, I should not be thinking that way. That is not good. It is better to think this way. Okay? So if we just think and the thought is stuck there in our mind, that is not metacognition. Okay? It's just a function of cognition. There is no function of the emotion. If we start asking ourselves, hey, why am I thinking this way? Oh, that is not a good thought. This is a better thought. Then we are engaged in metacognition. Then there is the process of self-questioning. We question ourselves. Is it a humane thing to do this? Okay, among us teachers, when our students submitted late their assignment, what is our usual reaction? What do we tell them? Most of us probably will say, I am not going to accept that anymore because it is beyond the deadline. The deadline is 5 o'clock and 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock. You know, that's a very cognitive way of looking at things because the deadline is 5 o'clock is the number, we are just focused on that. And so, well, they have to submit at 5 o'clock. However, if someone submits a late assignment beyond 5 o'clock, and then we ask the reason, why are you submitting only this time when there is an instruction that you have to submit at 5 o'clock? And if we listen to the reason, we weigh the reason of the students, we put our feelings into action, then we might consider accepting a late submission. That's why they say the teachers are the most humane professionals. Humane because we tend to be very emotional in our dealing with our students. That is good. But to be purely emotional, to be purely rational, they have their own negative, more negative consequences than positive. But if we are going to balance the rational and the emotional, then that would be very good. And then lastly, there's self-monitoring. Have you ever asked yourself, what kind of a teacher am I? Am I a teacher who is better now than the teacher that I was last year? What kind of teacher was I 5 years ago? Am I proud of the teacher that I was? What are the things that I did not like about my teaching practices in the past? What are the things that I like about myself now as a teacher? Okay. Also, effective assessment makes them reflect and evaluate intentionally their own learning. There are two keywords here. One is reflect, and the other one is evaluate. If we give an effective assessment to our students, where they are going to reflect, they are going to write their thoughts, their feelings. They are not just going to copy the answer from their notes, from the module, from the textbook. Then we are helping them reflect in their own learning. Most of the time, we ask essay questions that are very objective. Objective in the sense that they can find the answers in the lecture notes. Sometimes they just parrot what we said. They quote exactly what we said. If they do that, it means to say they did not engage in a critical thinking. If the information we have given them is acceptable to them or not. If the information we have given them is accurate or it is inaccurate. Also, evaluate intentionally their own learning. The evaluation that they get, the grades that they get, usually comes from us. And then we say, we are not the ones who make your grades. You are the ones who make your grade. But many students would not realize that. They would not realize that. They would say, it is the teacher who failed them. But if we engage them in a process where they are also going to reflect, evaluate their learning, then they may not deflect all the time. It is not always teacher factor, but there's also their contribution to their performance. They will realize, they will recognize their contribution in their performance. And for us teachers, what are the benefits if we are going to do effective assessment? Okay, we reflect on our own practice. As I mentioned a while back, if we reflect on our practices as a teacher this time, are we a better teacher than last year, than 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? Do we see an improvement in our practice? Are we progressing or are we regressing? Regressing meaning to say, instead of becoming a very good teacher, we are sliding back. Okay? Sometimes we slide back because we fail to understand the method that we are doing as a teacher, our unique practices as a teacher. Sometimes we just copy what another teacher is doing. We do not have that signature anymore as a teacher. We do not have that unique brand as a teacher. Some teachers like very much to be called a terror teacher. Terror, a terrorist. Is that the brand that you want your students to remember you for the rest of your lives? That one day when you meet them somewhere else, they would look at you and say, hey, that is the terror teacher in my elementary years, in my high school years, when I was in college. That is the teacher I hated the most. Is that the image? Is that the brand that we would like our teachers, our students to have about us? Okay? So sometimes we fail. We fail to reflect on our practice because we are so constrained on meeting standards rigid standards that are set by the educational system, that are set by school policies. Giving effective assessment deepen our knowledge of our students, which will lead them to more targeted instruction and successful learning experiences. You know, I always give as a requirement in all of my classes journal writing, a reflective journal writing, which is one of the methods of assessment I'm going to talk about in the later part of this talk. When I give them journal writing activities, I get to know them. I get to know them who they are, their difficulties that they are encountering in other subjects, why they weren't able to submit their assignments. And so, analyzing what they have written in their journal, I come up with learning activities and meaningful assessments that will shape the learning experiences of my students. I do not give them purely cognitive activities, but I give them activities that will also develop their emotional or their emotional affect, their ability to relate well with their classmates, and their ability to relate with themselves. Our students will hate coming to school if they know that everything we are going to give them in the classroom is measured through what they know, through how much they are able to memorize. So, what effective assessment tools, therefore, can we use to assess student learning? I have done this in my 20 years of, 20, more than 22 decades of teaching. And I would say that I have achieved not 100% success, but 90% or more success, depending on the group of students I'm handling. So alongside with the quizzes and the tests that measure how much they know about the subject, alongside with the checklist that I use to assess their skills in doing a particular activity, I use the following to assess their affect. When I say affect, I'm referring to their emotion, their feelings, their values, their attitudes, their motivations, their habits. Okay. So one is self-report. So what's a self-report? It is an account of attitude or feelings towards the subject matter. I usually do this or give this as an activity during our first meeting and our last meeting, class meeting. First, during our first meeting, I tell them to write a short paragraph about their feelings towards social studies or towards history. Do they like it? Don't they like it? If they like it, what do they like about it? If they don't like it, why don't they like it? And then I'm going to synthesize their responses. Most of the time, students manifest that they do not like history as a subject because they have to memorize time, dates, places, people, events. They dislike that. So that, based on those responses of my students, I'm going to come up with learning activities that will dwell more on reflecting on the significance of a particular event, reflecting on the importance of the action of a certain person. Like in Philippine history, why did then President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law. When I took Philippine history myself, that subject was taught to me by my teacher in a very chronological manner, a very historical manner. But we did not talk about the intentions, the motives of the people behind. Okay? So, at the end of the semester, I tell them again to write the same narrative. Did their attitude towards history change or their attitude is retained? Again, I would do an analysis of their responses and I will use the results for the next subject or for the next semester. Another tool could be a rating scale. I got this from Nitko 2001. He has some suggestions and I find it very good. Now, you can have your own rating scale or you can ask the students to make their own rating scale. But to guide them in using this, I suggest that you design the rating scale and you tell them to use it for their own selves or use it for others. So, what is the importance of a rating scale? It helps students understand the learning target or the outcomes, and it helps focus students' attention on performance. How does that happen? Because they're going to rate themselves on certain aspects, and they have to do this honestly. Of course, you don't expect 100% honesty from our students. I have students who would rate themselves very high, very high on industry, very high on their ability to cooperate during group activities. But when I observe them, hey, they're very passive. Of course, we don't expect them to always give a rating that gives them that gives us a picture of who they are. A completed rating scale gives specified feedback to students as far as their strengths and weaknesses with respect to the targets to which they are measured. Now, you have to process the responses in the rating scale. I would like to underscore here the importance of giving feedback to the students. Because if you simply tell the students, okay, you submit now to me your rating scale, and then you don't do any processing at all, meaning you don't analyze, you don't interpret the responses in the rating scale, you don't give them any feedback, then it defeats the purpose of giving that activity. Students not only learn the standards, but may also internalize the set of standards. So they would know, hey, so in a laboratory subject, this is how I should be behaving inside a laboratory room. And I believe the standards that we have seen in that rating scale, they will remember it, not just when entering a laboratory room, but when they're also in a classroom, when they're in church, in other institutions, or probably even when they are at home. So the students are introduced to the notion that there are standards of behavior, there are standards of acting, there are standards of dealing with people. And then the rating scale will also show how each student has grown or progress. That is, if we are we rate, for example, we ask them, we give them this activity. They're going to rate their attitude towards their subject on one as number one. Let's say they score this as 2. I am happily attending my classes in human rights education. They score this as 2. I study well to perform well in my class in human rights education. They score this as 1. I submit on time the assignments given by my teacher. I actively participate in the discussion of human rights education in our class. The score is 1. Hey, what does that tell us? Why is it that the score of the students is 1, 2? You did not even give a score of 5 or 4. Well, that will make us reflect on our practice as a teacher. But sometimes, among us teachers, we will throw back the question to the students. This student is really not interested in the subject. This student is not a classroom material. This student has other interests. I am doing my best. What we are doing is not reflecting. We are deflecting. Okay? Instead of looking at the result and thinking or reflecting on what we have done as a teacher, on who we are as a teacher, we are looking at them as a student. It defeats the purpose of giving this activity. We give a numerical rating scale. An example of an activity would be this. Rate your attitude towards your subject on human rights education. Use the following scale to guide you in rating yourself. This is actually a variation of this rating scale because in this rating scale, they are going to give themselves a score. And our clue, we have given them a guide that 1 is the lowest, where they very much disagree, and 5 is the highest, which means they very much agree. But in this numerical rating scale, we have given already a specific scale to guide them in rating themselves. I am referring to this one. So if they rated themselves as 1, it means to say the statement is not true to them. It does not apply to them. 2, slightly true to me. 3, it's true to me. 4, it's very true to me. So they are going to rate themselves here. So if they're going to check number 1, I enjoy doing the activities given by the teacher. If they check 3, well, that's true to them. If in number 2 they checked 2, well, it means it's slightly true to them. Again, we don't leave this activity as is. We gave it as an activity, therefore we have to process it. How are we going to process it? We are going to analyze the responses of the students. Then we do our interpretation. And then again, we reflect on our practice. If their overall score is 2, slightly true to me. I enjoy doing activities given by the teacher. That's slightly true to me. You know, if it is true, it means to say the students are half-heartedly attending your classes. They are not fully engaged in the activities. They are contented with a grade of probably 75, 79. They do not aspire for a higher grade. So there is lackluster in the attitude of the students in your subject. So what does that tell you as a teacher? Point of reflection. We also have a descriptive graphic rating scale. So we can give this activity. To what extent do the students participate in group activities? Well, you can tell the group leader to do an evaluation of the group mates. So you give this sheet, a blank sheet with this to the group leader, and then tell the group leader to fill it out. Never participates in the activities. Hey, this person participates as much as the classmates or the group mates, meaning that student carries his own weight, the same as the others. And then participates more than the classmates or more than the group mates, meaning exerted more effort than the others. I believe when you had your research, group research, maybe in the undergrad or the graduate school, You had this feeling that you're the one who's doing all the work, and yet you get the same score as the others. Yeah, it's a reality. And we say it is not fair. Now, to make the students be aware, be conscious of their attitude, to make themselves be conscious of what they are doing, of how much they have contributed, why not give an activity like this? And then they will talk about it. Claire will probably be asking, why, why do you say that I never participated in the activities? It will not just be the group leader who is going to give the observation, but even these classmates, these group mates, will also be giving their observation. Mary and Dave would say, yes, it's true, we have done more than what you did. Peter, John, and Jane would complain and say, no, we did more than what you did. Claire would say, but I did as much as what Peter, John, and Jane did. Well, good if there is a conflict because they learn to settle their own differences. By engaging in a dialogue, they would be able now to resolve whatever crisis, whatever internal problems they have among themselves. And so, at the end of probably the semester or the school year, you give again the same to the group leader, and he will now perform the same assessment. Would still be placed here, never participates in the activities. Or Claire would probably have been motivated to do more than the others. Let's say here, to what extent did I participate in group activities this month? Now, this one is for assessing a group activity. This one is assessing for the student to assess himself in his participation in group activities during that month. Or maybe during the semester, or maybe during the school year. They're going to make an assessment of themselves. Would he put himself here, never participated in the activities? Of course, he's going to recall what were those activities. If this activity was given by my teacher, did I participate? To what extent did I participate? What did I contribute? Did I just give snaps? Did I just give monetary contribution? Or I just gave us one sentence? I just contributed to the development of the title? What? Or would I put myself under participated as much as my classmates? Then I will be writing the reasons below. Did I participate more than my classmates? Then again, I'm going to write the details below. And so the student looking at this would now reflect on his own practice as a student and evaluate himself. What kind of student is he? Is he a cooperative student? Or he is a student who did not think of the welfare of the others? We also have a semantic differential scale. Okay, we can give this activity, which best describes your attitude towards war. Notice that 0 is in the middle. 0, that means they are neutral. So on the extremes, we have here on the right a positive attitude and on the left a negative attitude. So neutral and then 1, meaning say a little bit positive, 2, somewhat positive, and 3, positive. Okay? 1 is very negative attitude. 2 is a somewhat negative attitude. And 3 will probably be a very negative attitude. And then we can tell them to write the reason below. Why did they rate themselves? Why did they rate their attitude towards the war that way? Or better yet, we tell them to share in class why their rating of their attitude is like that. Then we have a Likert scale. So you know the difference between a Likert scale and a rating scale, I believe. A Likert scale is usually used to determine the extent of attitude. Okay? So unlike a while ago, in the rating scale, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Here, we have strongly disagree, disagree, agree, and strongly agree. Okay? And then maybe you can tell them to check, put a check mark on that column that indicates their agreement, their extent of agreement or disagreement on the statements. And then again, process by doing an analysis and interpretation of whatever data you see in this Likert scale. Next, we have a checklist. What is a checklist for? So a checklist, you can make it yourself and give it to the students, or you can tell the students to do their own checklist, or make a checklist and then give it to you for checking. Then you agree. You come up with a consensus as to the contents of the checklist. Okay. So how do we use a checklist in affective assessment? So we can tell the students to enumerate all the attributes and characteristics that they wish to observe relative to the concept that is being measured. So this can be done in the context of a particular topic in a lesson, or it can be done in general. In my case, I usually do it in general. Like at the beginning of the semester, I give a checklist to my students, and then I tell them, you keep this and you submit it until at the end of the semester. What are you going to do? Okay, so I tell them. So these are characteristics, a list of attributes, a list of characteristics. I want you to focus on a particular classmate, not a friend. Probably choose the person you don't like in class. And then observe that person. So for the first month, at the end of the month, you look at this checklist and then you check which of these has that person you do not like demonstrated. What have you observed in that person? Did you observe this? You check it. And as much as possible, you have to be objective, looking at that person. The next month, the same. The next month, the same. You know, when I was doing an analysis of this checklist that was accomplished by my students, I noticed that there is a change in their perception or in their feelings towards the person. At first, they did not like the person, but probably because they were too focused on observing what that person is, they are seeing something good in that person. And so, what they did not check during the first month, on the third month, they checked it already, or on the fourth month, they checked it. And then at the bottom of the checklist, I tell them what is now your overall analysis of this person. What do you feel about this person? What do you think of this person? And most of them have a positive attitude and a positive perception towards the person that they did not like. Of course, there are some whose feelings and whose perceptions were retained from the first month to the last month. They have not seen anything good in that person. You know, these are the students that we have to pay extra attention to. You know that expression, first impression lasts? Probably they are living up to that. The impression on that person the first time is the same impression they have until the end of the semester or end of the school year. So something must be done. An intervention must be done about these students. Now, we arrange these attributes as a shopping list of characteristics. And then ask the students to mark those attributes or characteristics which are present and to leave blank those which are not. Okay, that's a process that you might adopt. Example here. To check the characteristics that you like in a teacher. Leave blank those that you do not like. So, in a way, we are telling our students to assess us. Considerate to students who are delayed in submitting requirements. Do they like that? If they don't like it, then leave it blank. Easy to approach. Friendly and soft-spoken. Okay, I like that. Strict in the submission of requirement. I don't like that. I leave that blank. Uses varied teaching methods and strategies. I don't like that. I just want one method. Well-groomed and appearance. Of course, I like that. Okay? So when you receive the feedback, use it to improve yourself. Hey, this is my favorite. And for a long, long time, I had been giving this an activity to my students. There are times I tell myself, I'll stop doing this because it's too emotionally heavy already. But then I could not. I do not know. But it's my way of connecting with the students. So this is what I do. I choose a theme, like a lesson that they learned about life within the week, or the treatment of people on each other, which they have observed, because I asked them to write a weekly journal. They submit every Friday. So they observe on Saturday until Thursday. What lesson in life have they learned? And then they are going to write it. Just one important lesson. How did they learn it? What are their thoughts and their feelings about it? And then I'm going to give a feedback. I write something about it. Okay? So, I mean, I'm trying to validate their feelings, validate their thoughts. And then, at the end of the month, I process the contents collectively. Of course, I ask permission from them. I have their informed consent that at the end of the month, I am going to synthesize all the lessons that they have learned. And then share it to them at the end of the month. And then I do it again the next month. Now, a while back, I said that it's quite heavy. What makes this reflection journal writing heavy? There are students who tend to become very personal, that through journal writing, they find an avenue to express themselves, to write about the feelings that they are keeping to themselves, to write about the thoughts that they cannot tell someone else, to write about a secret. And of course, I am duty bound to protect all of these ones. Very personal information, I do not include it in my collective processing. What do I learn from that? I learned that my students trust me with very sensitive, very critical information. They talk about the relationship with their parents, the relationship with their boyfriend. They talk about depression. They talk about very, very nasty experiences. And sometimes I have to stop reading because I would tend to become very emotional also. Sometimes I would get angry. What kind of parents are this? What kind of parents do we have? What kind of boyfriend is this? What kind of girlfriend is this? What kind of teacher is that? Some students, many students are write about their teachers. And so I get to know also another aspect of my colleagues through their journal. But I don't talk about this with them. It's a very good activity that you can do, but make sure you have to give feedback. This is very important. More than the expression of their thoughts and their feelings, I believe my students are excitedly waiting to read what I have written in their journal. And then writing activities. activities, of course, we are very familiar with this already. A reflection paper, a position paper, reaction paper, essay writing, letter writing, poetry, short story writing. Now, there are some of us who tend to treat this in a very intellectual or a very cognitive, a very rational manner. But if we factor in affective assessment, we are now going to balance our biases towards what they have written in, especially in the reaction paper. Here, I know some teachers who would give a very low score if the position or the reaction of the student does not match their position or the reaction. They want that the position of the students is just like their position. They want that the students are going to react in the same way that they react to an issue. That is not good. We are curtailing the freedom of the students. If you remember, one philosopher who came up with this notion of culture of silence, that's Paulo Freire, in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. He coined this concept of the culture of silence in the classroom because of this bunking style of teaching. Bunking style of teaching. We deposit information in their mind, and then we expect to withdraw the same information we have given them. No extra, no more, no less. What we have deposited is exactly what we are going to withdraw. And because of that, the students' creativity, their ability to think critically and analytically is stifled. There is a culture of silence. Okay? So we should not be doing that in our classroom. These writing activities are actually very good ways for us to explore the thoughts and the feelings of our students. Does their grammar matter? Well, for some, of course, it does because it might distort their ideas. So in my case, I tell them because they're going to write about their thoughts and write about their feelings, they can express it in the language that they know, provided I also understand the language. So it's not necessarily in the English language. Reading about their poetry sometimes is too emotional. It is here where they're going to express themselves, express their frustrations, their disappointments, their happiness, their positive outlook in life. A myriad of expressions, a myriad of emotions. You can read them in their poetry. The short story that they are writing sometimes is actually their story, and they love doing this. For those of you who are teaching in elementary, maybe you are very familiar with this book, Dear Mr. Henshaw. I love this book. Okay, it's an interaction between a student and the author, Mr. Henshaw. A student who was made by his teacher to correspond with a certain author, meaning to choose an author to write. And then the author will write back. So this boy did not expect that Mr. Henshaw will be writing back. But Mr. Henshaw has a question that he's going to answer, that this boy is going to answer every time. The first question, who are you? This boy, a typical boy, or rebellious boy, will say, I've already told you about who am I. But then, thinking of this question, who are you? He wrote more about himself. It is not just about his name. It is not just his family, his parents, who his parents are. It is not just about his address. It is not about his grade level or the name of his school. He wrote more about this. The next question, what do you look like? Now, this boy reflected on himself, and he has written not just about his physical appearance, but he has written something about himself, what he looks like internally, according to how he sees himself. And then the correspondence went on. Like, what is your family like? Where do you live? Do you have any pets? Do you like school? Who are your friends? Who is your favorite teacher? What bothers you? What do you wish? In the process, it's actually making the boy reflect on himself, not just treat this requirement as a requirement of the subject, but it is something that he enjoyed, that he missed it when Mr. Henshaw did not write him back anymore. And we can have drawings also. So we can tell them to draw pictorial illustrations of their feelings or their emotions using certain emoticons. And I'm believing that many of our students, even in college, love this one. These drawings would be symbolic representation of their attitude, their values, or their motivation. Let's say I do this. When I meet my class, I pass around an attendance sheet. I do not tell them to sign opposite their name, but I tell them to draw their feelings at that moment. So there are some who are going to draw an angry face. There are some who are going to draw a sad face. There are some who are going to draw any expression. I do that during the first meeting, the first day of the week, that is Monday, and then on a Friday, and then I'm going to compare. Hey, this is what they were feeling on a Monday. On a Friday, this is what they were feeling. On a Monday, I'm going to do an analysis. Okay, many of them are sad. 50% of them are angry. Only 10% are happy. Why? What is wrong with these guys? Why is their feeling like this? And so I am going to devise learning activities that I believe would help improve their disposition. And so if I'm going to make a comparison at the end of the week, I would see that there is an improvement. I'm not going to say that the activities are perfect, that those who were sad on a Monday were totally happy on a Friday. No. Sometimes I would notice that those who were sad on a Monday were still sad on a Friday. The next week is still the same. So in my mind, I'm saying, why are these students very sad? What makes them sad? Hey, you can give this activity. Opposite the title of the song, you draw or you paste the emoticon that describes your feelings when you hear it. Like the national anthem. Hey, what do you feel when you hear the national anthem? What do you feel when you hear the song Silent Night, Holy Night? Driver's license, save your tears, good days. Sometimes we have to update ourselves also on the music, the in music these days. So we would know, hey, do they like it? Do they appreciate it? Right? In one activity, when I gave this as an activity to my class, I noticed that 40% have drawn a sad face in the national anthem of the Philippines. 40%. 60% they are happy when they hear it. 40% are sad. So what I did was I I grouped them, those who are happy, those who are sad. I asked those who are happy, hey, could you sing the national anthem and make this group happy? Okay. Then also I would ask this group who have drawn a sad emoticon. What makes you happy? Is it the lyrics? Is it the melody, the rhythm? Okay, some would say it's the lyrics that makes them sad. Some would say it's the melody. So I would ask them, which of these lyrics really makes you sad? And what would you like to replace it with? Which rhythm, which melody makes you sad? What would you like to replace it with? Okay, of course, we cannot change the lyrics of the national anthem. We cannot change the melody of the national anthem. But in a way, it's processing the feelings of these students. So lastly, I'm going to give some considerations in affective assessment of learning. So first one, we need to consider the individual differences among the learners. Individual differences among the learners, like in relation to their gender or their sex. What we know for a fact that males, females have different interests in terms of lessons or in terms of topics, so we can devise activities that's going to balance this. We consider also their learning styles of the students. Are they visual, more of the visual, auditory, spatial, or kinesthetic? We consider the multiple intelligences, the socioeconomic status. Well, we consider this, of course, we also give cognitive assessment. But the focus, when we consider this in affective assessment, is going to shift already. It's more on making a connection between our activity and the life of our students or the nature of our students or learners. Next, we consider our biases as a teacher or our biases as a person. Well, we are human beings. No one is completely or absolutely objective. There are still some aspects where we tend to be very, very subjective. Our biases could be shaped by our philosophy in life. They could be shaped by our values, by our principles, by our, you know, backgrounds. So if we come from a public school, probably we could relate effectively with the students in the public school where we are teaching. If we come from a private school, probably we would have some biases about the public school where we are teaching. Sometimes we can't help but make a comparison. We would go back to our experience there where we came from, in relation to what we are experiencing at the moment. Our capability to empathize could only be developed if we have the ability to recognize individual differences among learners and acknowledge our biases as a teacher, as a person, and we are willing to do something about it. And then we put ourselves in the shoes of the students. We cannot say that what they are experiencing is not realistic if we have not experienced it. Because we have not experienced it, their experience is not realistic. Sometimes that's our bias. Okay? But the more we get to know about them, the more we get to know that, hey, I may not have experienced it, but it is an authentic experience. And so we ground our capability to empathize on the fact that the experience of our students is authentic. And so, if the experience is authentic, our experience is also authentic. Not because we did not experience it, that they are lying about it. And then we should have a debriefing plan. As I said, especially when you require journal writing, affective assessment tend to be very, very heavy. We have to learn to put some boundaries, a little boundary between us and our students so that we could somewhat detach. We detach, but at the same time, we empathize and we sympathize with them. Okay? If you are going to take things very personally, it might contribute to mediocrity in our learning. Because you know too well the situation of this student as you are reading it in his journal or in your other assessment activities. You say, hey, I pity very much the student, therefore I am going to pass him. They're struggling, he is poor, etc., etc. You are not helping the student at all. You are contributing to the mediocrity of the system. Therefore, you should have a debriefing plan. And to end my talk, I'd like to read this. Regardless of how intelligent a student is, as seen in the results of cognitive measures, his or her education is not complete without the evidence of proper attitude and values. One's humanity is demonstrated in one's actions that conform to the standards of acceptable human behavior. Thank you.
So much, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your presentation with our participants, and we will come back with you after quiz competition session. So please stay with us. Thank you. So dear participants, get ready for our quiz competition session. So don't forget to tag, share, and mention your friends in our comment box. So after this short video, we'll come back with our quiz session. So hello everyone, welcome back to our quiz competition session. Right now we have 15, 16 participants who will join in this session. So thank you all for joining. And don't forget to share and mention your friends in our comment box. And you can also see the joining link in our comment box. So you can browse Chrome, click go to www.slide.com, and today's quiz code is QuizIGP. So give your full name before joining because it will print in the winner certificates. And remember one thing, there is no relation between the quiz competition certificates and the international webinar certificates. Please everyone stay with us till the end because in the end session we will share the international webinar code in our certification process. And after the quiz, we will start our Q&A with our speakers. So get ready with your question also for the next session. So we will start our quiz session within a minute. So everyone, please hurry up, join in this session. Right now we have 37 participants. So everyone get ready for this quiz session. Well, we will start in like a few seconds. So let's count down. Let's start countdown. 10, Nine, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two. Let's start it. So the first question is learning domains affective, changing feelings or hands on. You have only 8 seconds left. So the right answer is option number one, that is changing feelings. And 91% of our participants answer correctly. This round we have Charlene Kalamaguchi placed first. Okay, let's see the next question. What is affective learning? Learning the best way or deal with expression of feelings plus acceptance. So you have to choose one option between these two. So the right answer is option number two, that is deals with expression of feelings plus acceptance, and 94% of majority of the participants answered correctly. In this round, we have Sir Xavier Alvarez, is first position. Okay, moving to next question. What are the domains of learning? Cognitive, affective, psychomotor, or cognitive, affective, psychomotor? Choose your option. Correct answer is option number one, that is cognitive, affective, psychomotor, and 100% of all participants answer correctly. So congratulations to all of you. That's it, the leaderboard. We have again Sarah Xavier Alvarez in first position in this round. So congratulations again to our winners. Let's see the next question. Educative assessment can be defined as teacher self-educating assessment strategies or assessment that aims to give students feedback on progress. So the right answer is option number one, two, and the answer is assessment that aims to give students feedback on progress. Okay, and 97% of our participants chose the right answer. In this round, we have Ma'am Charlene Kalahamaguchi again. Is first position. So let's see the next question. Question 5. What are the domains of learning? Affective or presumptive? Right answer is option number one, that is affective, and 100% of our participants get the right answer. Congratulations to all of you. Again, we have Namchalin Kalamaguchi is first position in this round. Okay, all right, we're moving to the next question. Learning objectives may also be known as what? Enabling omnibus or enabling objectives. Time is up, and let's see the correct answer. Okay, option number two, and 87% of our participants choose option number two. Great answer. Still now, Madam Charlie Kalamaguchi plays first position. leading on first position this round. So let's see the next question. Question number 7. Learning domain, cognitive, storage and recall of information or feelings and values.
তো মাস্টার্স করছে এটা সব কিছু অনেক সিনিয়র ও ব্যাচেলর কমপ্লিট করছে 15 মাস্টার্স কমপ্লিট করছে 17 ইংরেজি কমপ্লিট
So the right answer is option number 1, that is storage and recall of info. And 66% of our role of participants. Again, we have Charlie Kalabaguchi, this first edition for this round also. Okay, we have last 3 more questions. We're moving to the next question, question number 8. Learning domains, psychomotor, so thinking and learning or hands-on. So the time is up. Correct answer is hands-on, and 79% of the participants choose correct answer. In this round, we have Ma'am Sharon Yamaguchi, this first position again. Okay, moving to next question, question number 9. Summative assessment is assessment of learning or assessment for learning, of learning for learning. We have to choose one option between these two. Correct answer is option number 1, assessment of learning, and 89% of participants get the correct answer. Okay, no change. In first position, still Ma'am Charlie Maguchi. Okay, following Ma'am Jessie Rainey Armzolets. Then we have Ma'am Emily MP. We have Sir Bailey Vigas and Ma'am Maria Fabula. So we are moving to last question, question number 3. Tab. How many factors improve learning through assessment? 5 or 6? So we have to choose one. How many factors? 5 or 6? You have only 6 milliseconds left. Time is up. The correct answer is option number 1, this 5, and 77% of our participants chose the right answer. Okay, let's see the leaderboard and the winners. Congratulations, Ma'am Charlene Kalamaguchi, for being first in this quiz competition. Okay, we have then Ma'am Jessie Rainey are Roselle's placed second. We have Ma'am Emily and Field placed third. Then we have Ma'am Maria Fumula placed fourth. We have Ma'am Evelyn Perry placed fifth. Let's see the next thing. Okay, we have Ma'am Maylin Bigas. Okay, Sir Maylin Bigas placed sixth. Ma'am Carolina B. Hayes placed 7. Ma'am Rosie Source placed 8. Ma'am Pima Young placed 9. And Ma'am Marlita Nilo placed 10. So congratulations to our top 10 winners. Okay, so again, congratulations to our top 10 winners, and you will get your winner certificates from our Facebook official page. And after the program, after 15 minutes later, the winner certificates will be posted on our Facebook page. So don't forget to collect and don't forget to celebrate the activities. Get ready for next session, that is Q&A session with our honorable speaker. So everyone get ready with your question and don't forget to tag, share, and mention your friends in our comment box. So after this short video, we will come back with our honorable speakers. Get ready. Hello, ma'am. Welcome again in our Q&A session. So, my dear participants and the real knowledge seeker, please write down your question in our comment box. So, already we have a question from one of our active participants. So the question is, how can the educators reach the challenges of implementing the effective assessment, such as non-utilization of the result of effective assessment in decision making, such as promotion and certification? Lack of enthusiasm on the part of the teachers about assessing the class for all effective purposes and subjectivity in the rating of effective behavioral traits.
Okay, so
Your camera is off.
I would like to answer the second question first about assessing the class for all affective purposes and subjectivity in the ratings of affective behavior traits. I mentioned that not all assessments are to be recorded. They do not have to be part of the academic performance of the students. We can use our ratings for their affective behavioral traits for improving our learning activities and the assessments that we are going to give. But they are not to be given a score because there is no standard. Even if we are going to say we come up with a rubric, that rubric is still very subjective. Actually, even in traditional quizzes, cognitive quizzes, they are not at all 100% objective. There is still subjectivity in these questions. As to the question regarding the challenges of implementing effective assessment, I could very well relate with this one. No, using the result in decision making, such as promotion and certification. If this question is in the context of the Philippine educational system, we know for a fact that there are prescriptions, and although there are prescriptions, our officials do not stick to the regulations. There is still the effect of our culture, particularly subjectivity, such as regionalism, ethnocentrism. That is why affective assessment in promotion, in certification, does not work.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, dear participants, if you have any query or questions, please write down in our comment box. Okay, we have a question from Evelyn Pipaterry. Good afternoon, ma'am. What tools to find it easy to change journal writing? It's tedious to read their answer in a paragraph. Thank you.
Well, journal writing is always in a paragraph format. There is no way, no other way that we can do journal writing except to tell the students to write it in a paragraph format. And yes, it is very tedious to answer, to read it and to give feedback to it. But I believe if we have the commitment as a teacher, we have the commitment to improve the holistic learning experiences of our students, we are going to go through the process of really reading and giving feedback. But again, if this question is being asked in the context of the Philippine educational system, where we have 50 students in a class, and we have how many classes? 10 classes for that matter. Well, I doubt if we could really make journal writing work.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Now, আগস্টের 21 ওটা হাতে সময় আচ্ছা ইন্টার্ন করতে বাট তো ব্যাকএন্ড ডেভেলপমেন্ট সব কন্টেন্ট করে এখানে দিছে কম্পিউটার গুলো এখানে দিছে কাজ সব কি কন্টেন্ট
So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for coming in IGP's platform and sharing your knowledge with our participants. And we expect that our participants get benefited from this webinar. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
So, my dear lovely participants, this is our certification process that I'm going to share with you. So, today's program name is Effective Assessment of Learning, and the code is IGP 1594. Let me tell you once again, the code is IGP 1594, and without this code, you cannot get your certificate. So because you can claim your certificates anytime. And you can also visit our website. Our website address is www.aduigp.com. So please collect your certificates and don't forget to celebrate with IGP. So I would like to thanks to all of our participants. Till now they are with us, and also I would like to mention that you get your quiz winner certificates from our Facebook official page after the program and after 15 minutes. Later it will be posted on our Facebook official page. So don't miss it. Please collect it, and I'm inviting all of you to our next session tonight. So don't miss it again. Until then, everyone, please stay safe and stay healthy. I'm Nasreen signing off right now. Thank you for your cooperation and your active participation. Thank you once again. Have a great day to all of you. Thank you.